So, Mike, thanks a lot for agreeing to come on. And I just thought most of my audience, I think, might not be aware of your channel because, as you say, yours is one of many that's been heavily throttled by Gulag Tube. So, you live in Poland. So, what took you to Poland?
Yeah, so I met my wife about coming up to 10 years ago, and she's Polish. So when we was looking at places where we might want to settle down and live the kind of lifestyle that we was hoping to live, which was to be more self-sufficient. And we was living in the UK at the time, and I was kind of seeing that my career would probably be coming to an end, not because my career was coming to an end, but by choice, that the way things were going in terms of the tone of society and the radical leftism and things like this. And my career was unfortunately very much heavily a part of the leftist agenda. So when we was making our decisions, we decided that it would probably be a wiser decision to leave the UK with all of the things that we saw on the horizon, and also, like I said, with my career. So we decided on Poland, and yeah, just
So,
moved up
Mike,
here
just
in
just
2020.
just just for the benefit of the viewers, so what was your career back then?
Yeah, so I worked in therapy, counseling, and social work. So I
Yeah,
guess the generic term would be social work, but I kind of specialized in working with young people and looked after children.
yeah. And so when did you move to Poland? How long ago again?
It was 2020. Yeah, so I think it was around
2020.
about
Yeah,
the same time you moved, I think, Nigel, because I
yeah,
think
yeah.
I don't know if you told me or I heard somewhere else that. I mean, that was the year where everyone was escaping the where they was, right?
Yeah.
That was kind of like the fork in the road, and I don't think it's ever going back. So,
No.
and I think the times are changing fast. And if you are planning to get out of a location, it's like time is at the essence now. I think we're in the last days of freedom of movement.
100%. I couldn't agree more with that. So, did you go to any of the sort of demonstrations in London? Like, because I went to the first two expecting it to be chock a block and packed out, given just the extreme craziness of what was going on. And for me, that was played a big part in me finally deciding that we had to go, was that there was only about 4 or 5 thousand people in Trafalgar Square. And I just thought, well, what's the point? No one else seems to be bothered. Everybody seems to be complying with this biomedical fascism. So for me, it was just, I don't know how you felt. What was your thought processes at the time?
Yeah, I'm not a protesting type but per se, although we did go to one of the ones in Poland in the capital, so in Warszawa. But no, I didn't go to any in the UK. It was I think the thing with the protest is, like you said, it's an expression of people's frustration. And I certainly wouldn't say to people, don't protest. No, I think there is a time and a place, but ultimately, like you, the pushback wasn't there. I mean, you
Oh,
didn't have to be a genius at the time. I lived in my city. I spoke to people every single day. I was in a career that was considered essential services. So I was driving around and, in people's houses day in, day out,
yeah.
and you could see what was going on. You could feel the tone. Like I couldn't find anyone in the family or in the broader community that had any resistance to it besides us, of course, we were completely against it. So, yeah, so at the time, we was too busy making our plans to move. That was the key part of our lives then was, you know, like what can we I mean, I would say, Nigel, with all of these agendas, there is an inevitability to some of it. Like you have to accept that certain parts of this are just going to be steamrolled through. And I'm somebody, I mean, as you can tell by the name of my show, it's the Parallel Systems broadcast. I don't believe the political solution exists. I think it's going to be more of the same. There is no reform, there is no political uh, compromise. I think it's no, you have to build your own parallel systems.
Okay.
Our best opportunities are to go outside of their systems and start our own thing and let their system collapse, which it inevitably will, as all totalitarian regimes always do.
I agree. I agree with that. This is almost like the Ayn Rand Atlas Shrugged solution, isn't it? Which is the creative, hardworking, gifted people in society, the intelligent people who pass the 2021 intelligence test. They've just withdrawn their consent, and you can see that already happening in Britain. A number of people have quit working because, as far as they see it, or certainly how I see it, is that choosing to work and pay into their system is actually immoral. It's supporting it. But And I agree completely with the parallel systems. You know, even on a like a very low level scale, people shouldn't be buying stuff from supermarkets. That they should be seeking out local suppliers and establishing local networks and connections. But Mike, I've got one idea to float past you that's that anyway, I think's interesting, and it's there's an element of hope in it. In that, in 2020 and 2021, the system was set up in that people were rewarded for conformity. You know, so they got the I'm gonna have to use a code word here, furlong, yeah, and they got their which was a great deal for a lot of them loved complying in return for not having to go to work and drinking wine in their back garden or a lot of city people where I lived in Guildford, they enjoyed working from home in inverted commas. Then you had all the other freebies, help out to eat out. I know somebody who fraudulently claimed a 50K bounce back loan. So of course he loved the Soviet Union. So what my element of hope here is that they won't be offering freebies in return for the next levels of compliance. And I think for many of these people, they're sort of Satanists in the sense that they only think about themselves. Like they didn't give a rat's ass about the impacts that the L downs were having on the elderly or depriving young people of vital years in their life. They didn't give a rat's ass about those people. The only thing that they bothered about was furlong and the kind of a bit of a laugh with the live action role play, let's play doctors and nurses. But I think as when they're told they're not allowed to drive their car or they've got to live in their 15-minute ghetto or they can't fly to their second home in Tuscany, then, I think you're going to see the new rebels of the Soviet Union emerge. So I think there's an element of hope there. So go on, Mike. That's what do you think about that? Do you think there's any truth in that, or is that hopium?
You know, I don't think things change much with human psychology. We all have certain characteristics. We all have the same drives and motivators. And what they were playing on during that whole time was people's propensity to want immediate satisfaction and people's propensity to want the easy route out. And the easy route out then psychologically was to just go along with it. And there was also some trinkets that they threw in. But I would probably not agree with the fact that they were rewarded, although they were like I said, they were rewarded in terms of superficial things. You got a little bit of
Yeah.
extra money, you got to spend more time at home, and all you had to do was just nod your head. But ultimately, the ones who were most compliant are now the ones who are most financially, psychologically, spiritually, and physically damaged. So, those early deceptive rewards have now led to a lot of, obviously, as we know, there's a lot of people who are very ill. I also know a lot of people who, like you said, were quite happy to take financial incentives and whatnot, and now they're going out of business because they can't afford to pay those loans back, and the
Yeah.
inflation's so high that
Yeah,
business is
exactly.
collapsing.
Because
So for the
that's
people,
sorry, Mike.
I was going to say, so for the people who refused the instant gratification and took the what seemed to be the hard road, we are now thriving. We're 4 years into this. We've got our farms, we've got our independent businesses, we have set ourselves up elsewhere, and we've got a big community that is far, far more motivated. And yet the other side, and I don't class them as an enemy, I'm just saying the other path that people took, they are, I would say, morally broken because they know
Yeah.
what's happened and they don't even speak about what's happened because, of course, then they have to admit to themselves what they may be facing in the future because they're seeing what we're seeing. So I do think there is hope. I do think that those people eventually do move sides, but it's also a case of the caliber of people. The people of principle, the people who have morality are already stepping outside. A
Yeah.
lot of those other people on the other side, I'm not going to be quick to embrace anyone unless they actually are willing to make an honest amends for the way they treat people before, and they actually genuinely want to stand with us because we're going into a period now where people like yourself, people like me, I don't need a load of people around me. We just need to focus on
Yeah.
ourselves. And if those people do genuinely come across and they genuinely want to be be a part of some kind of resistance, then I'll look to my left and right next time the big one comes and see if they're stood next to me then.
Yeah.
That's when it counts,
They
Nigel, is
need to
when the
show
things are actually
repentance,
happening.
don't they? They need to show repentance, genuine repentance. And I've not encountered anyone
Not a
who's
single person, not a single person has said to me, "Oh, listen, I'm sorry, I should have listened." I mean, and I don't need that, but ultimately, like I said, human beings are quite predictable somewhat. I've worked with human beings my entire life, and I don't worry about what other people do on this one. I look forward to hopefully having more people come across. That will happen because what's going to happen next time is, of course, every time there'll be more and more people that question what's happening and
yeah,
awaken to what's going on. And then they'll look at us and say, right, you guys are thriving. Geez, you guys are living independently. I don't worry about inflation because I've got my own energy systems. I don't worry about poisoned water because I've got my own well. So, as they see that us develop and because like I said at the start, there was a divergence and we're going further and further with each year down these separate paths that are diametrically opposed. So, yeah, I'm always willing to open my door to anyone, but it has to be genuine. It can't just be because I'm fearful. I don't want what they're offering now. Are you going to let me in? It's like, no, we have to do this strategically because we've got some tough times ahead, and you need people of integrity around you. That's key for me, is integrity.
well, I guess the thing is that unless they show repentance for what they did, their compliance, that they made a choice to go with evil, didn't they?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Then how can you trust those people until they show that repentance? Like, I'm all for repentance. I'll forgive people, but they need to offer that forgiveness first, don't they?
Well,
Before
I
you
don't
can
need.
trust them, before you can trust them, let's say that
For
before you
sure.
can
Trust
trust
is
them.
key. And I don't need to go and demand answers to the government for what they did. I said my bits then. And like I said, we built communities and now I'm helping people get ready for the next stage. But the people who went along with the last stage, the people who implemented it, who supported it, who helped cause all of that damage, they should be the ones now demanding answers. They should be tearing down
Yeah,
Whitehall. It's not our responsibility because I'm clean. My hands are clean on this.
yeah,
I didn't
100%.
blacken my soul with any of it. I said, no, I'm not
No,
taking part in it. And that's that.
no. Well, that's right. That's right. And I certainly feel happy with the decisions that I took at the time to withdraw my consent. But it's what was interesting, Mike. There is it, what evidence do you have for? Obviously, there's the physical health implications of the sheep dip, for want of a better words. Um, but then you also mentioned psychological impacts. Like, do you have any evidence of people being sort of psychologically harmed by them thinking about what they did or didn't do?
Um, I would say, anecdotally, yes. Like I've seen in the people like that I have contact with that were on that, almost like they've detached themselves from critical thought entirely because they know if they go back to it, they're going to have to face up to the skeletons in the closet.
Yeah,
And I've never had anyone discuss with me the complications that have come from, and bearing in mind the platform we're on, from those things. But I know people within my family. I've got multiple people who have been harmed, seizures that have come on for the first time in their life, driving licenses revoked.
yeah,
Somebody who got Parkinson's within a few months of it. He was scheduled a year to live. A colleague at my parents' work, an athlete, he was given a year to live. So the list
yeah,
is huge, but nobody is discussing it. So in terms of like the evidence, I would just say just a general lack of vitality in life. To
yeah, yeah,
actually see a hopeful future, because
yeah,
I guess that they're feeling regret and guilt, and regret, guilt, and shame are some of the heaviest emotions you can carry around. There's a
yeah,
reason why if you go through 12 steps, one of the key parts of 12 steps is to remove shame and guilt, because you'll
yeah,
never get an addiction out of yourself unless you can forgive yourself. So you
yeah,
have to go through this repentance. You have to go through this reconciliation process. You can't skip it, because if you do, you'll immediately go back round to the next one because you haven't, you haven't psychologically processed it all. So purely from a psychological perspective, yeah, I think people have got a lot of self-work to do. And we're doing self-work, right? Because we know that
Yeah.
we are fallible and we have to stay strong. So it's a collective thing, but the last thing you want to do is do something that you're not going to be able to forgive yourself of for
I don't
decades.
know. I don't know about you, Mike, and I've got to be a bit careful about what I say here now. But um, I would say my own self-esteem has been massively strengthened by what's happened over the last 4 years. That 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 this thing came along and it was a massive test. And at times I was surprised about my own resilience and strength of character. Like, for example, I remember it was back in September 2020 when the schools reopened, and there was this instruction that everybody attending the staff meeting at the beginning of the term must wear their underpants on their face. So it was like a primary school and a secondary school had this joint staff meeting, and there must have been I don't know 150 people in the room. And I walked in just as it was about to start, and I was the only person in the room with a clean face, that was breathing normally rather than through this through my underpants. And I was looking back on that now. That was quite. I'm quite. I'm going to use the. I know pride's a sin, but I'm quite pleased with. But at the time, I just felt that there was no alternative. I just had to do it. I don't know what you think, or did you always know that you were strong? Because I didn't.
Um,
I didn't know I was.
I think strength and courage are things that we reassert in our lives, and you have to reset it multiple times. Every day is a choice, right? Every day you get a choice to be a better person or a worse person. And every day you get to almost completely redesign your character. Now, we don't. We often build habits and we build traits and we kind of ingrain them. But still, there's always a choice each day. So, for me, like, yeah, throughout my life, I've always sought to try and improve myself. And I've failed
Yeah,
countless times, as many of us have. But my career, for one, that was a conscious decision to go into a career where I could try and add good to the world rather than take away from it. And I purposely
yeah,
chose to work with young people so that I could work with the most vulnerable groups that had the most propensity for change. A
yeah,
teenager is at that point in life where if you catch them at the right moment, you can really change their life before it gets to the point where they become drug addicts or do something terrible.
yeah.
And then I was an athlete as well for a lot of my life. So I did purposely invite. I was
Careful, Mike. I'll have to cut that bit out.
Yeah. When it got to CV, I was consciously, I guess, I trusted my resiliency for sure. That was important. And I think we all should be fomenting that now because it's not a
Yeah.
one-time deal. It's going to take
Oh,
many years. And yeah, so I think it's important for us to build, I call it voluntary hardship into your life. And
yeah,
I'm a big fan of that. So, over here on the farm, like we don't have hot water for, I don't know, 8 months of the year because we only have hot water when we light our stove and that heats our water. But in summer, our house has got, it's got walls that are about 3 foot thick, so you don't want the heating on
no,
outside of winter. And the winters are -20, but then the summers
yeah,
here are pretty good.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
so
yeah,
just simple stuff like cold showers. In summer, I do ice water bathing every day. I'm doing some physical exercise. Just before we spoke here, I did a hard workout. So just stuff like this. It's not big stuff, but it's just giving you that constant little dose of hardship so that when it comes involuntarily, you're prepared for it. And I think that's probably what a lot of people have been lacking. And when we go back to speaking
yeah,
about those people, why was they so quick to fold? Because all it took was a little bit of psychological pressure, a little
yeah,
bit of social hardship, and they were so comfortable before that they
yeah.
just accepted it. And I think that's the
What
contrast.
100%. It was almost like many of these people, they believed in Santa Claus, and Santa Claus was the government. And all they had to do to have a nice, easy, cozy life was just obey the government, obey authority. And then all of a sudden, I think this is what you're saying is that they've now realized that they've been betrayed by the god of big government that they've been worshipping for most of their lives. And I think that that's caused like cognitive dissonance in a way. It's caused them confusion. On the one hand, they still worship big government, but they're now having to come to the conclusion that big government wants some brown bread 6 foot under.
Yeah, and this is the consequences of 100 years of hypermaterialism, where we only worship stuff like the dead matter, the dead
Yeah,
materialism, and we don't have a higher aim or a higher purpose. And there's a reason
100%.
why throughout history it's been extremely important for human beings to have that higher goal, whether that's through a connection with your creator, with a god,
Yeah,
whether it's a high level philosophy like the ancient Greeks had. But the moment you strip society of that, it becomes
yeah,
all about, self-interest and narcissism. And that's
yeah,
why we've got mental health epidemics in children who just spend all the time staring at themselves and other people. So it really does require a leap right now for people to break free from that and to get themselves ready for the next stage, because I believe we're in a dying age. I think this is the final days of that old system. And you'll either go down with the ship or you will extricate yourselves before it sinks. You'll get in your life raft, you'll build those communities and those parallel systems, and that's what we're doing. And then you'll start the next system, and it will be based on something much more holistic. There'll be much more communication, real
yeah,
communication away from technology. There'll also be routes for people to thrive and to express themselves, where it's not all about what you've got, how much money do you have. And don't
yeah,
get me wrong, that's a key part of it. You as an economist, I'm an investor and I teach people about how to protect their wealth going into these harder times. And we do that as ferociously as we can because it's so key that we don't get wealth stripped, because then you're dependent. But it's only about becoming independent. It's about having options. It's not about having more stuff per se. So I think that's the challenge of our time, is to get ourselves ready for
yeah.
that next system and help build it. That's what we're here for.
I think switching into sort of economics almost, I think that's one thing that I've been quite shocked by is the number of people who are perfectly fine with the big government model morally. So, this idea that it's moral to call, because I get loads of people on my YouTube channel who basically say stuff like, oh, to fix a problem, all we need to do is tax the rich more. And they can't understand why that's a deeply immoral statement to make. In that, the state, it's not that rich people are going to be given a choice about whether they pay more to the government or not. It's basically forced on them. If they don't pay whatever the government tells them that they're supposed to pay, ultimately they get thrown in a cage, don't they? The,
Yeah,
the,
well,
the current system is based on violence or the threat of violence. That's what I'm saying, Mike. And we need to
the,
get
the
away
the only
from
thing
that.
we should have a big state, the only thing we should have a government for is to enshrine property rights, to make
Yeah,
sure people can have property and they're not being looted and burgled, and we don't have that. To have a
yeah,
limited police force and a limited military is so far as you need to protect your interests. And I would say I'm happy to pay for some kind of social care in terms of having some health service or having something, purely because we've lived through such immoral times that society is broken, and there's a lot of people who are born into multi-generational hardship. However, when it comes to taxation, it really is a case of what we're doing to achieve those ends is we're giving, let's say we're giving 40, 50% of our annual income to the government, and they are essentially wasting 98% of it. And that 2%
yeah,
is being used on the stuff they tell us is. The rest of it's being used on war, you're being
yeah,
used on corruption, being used to pay banksters that created
yeah,
the central bank system. And that's where it's all going. So no, we shouldn't be taxed. What we should do is have I mean, I'd be quite happy to have my communities supply everything it needs for itself, and therefore we can pay privately for the services. We can
yeah,
use our excess to bring it in ourselves. But I mean, these are the discussions to have. But I think for the people who are, I mean, saying those things, and I had someone say recently, it's far cheaper. It's far cheaper if we all pool our money to pay for these services. And I'm like, you really don't understand just how corrupt the system is then.
yeah.
The US never used to have any income tax.
No,
It
no.
didn't have income tax right up until 1913 when the Federal Reserve was introduced. So what was they
Yeah.
doing all those years before? You
Well,
know,
look at our own country. You're whereabouts in England are you from originally?
I'm from the north, so I'm up towards the Humber.
Humber, right? Okay. Yeah, I'm from Rochdale. So look at roads, canals, railways, hospitals, schools. Initially, those were all built by private money. So this kind of and sewerage systems, the idea that the state has to provide something or it doesn't happen is ludicrous. What I want to try to convince people of is that in the future that you and I want to see and create is one based on voluntary action rather than on compelled or coerced action. So all exchange should take place on a voluntary basis, which taxation isn't voluntary. Taxation ultimately is based on, if you don't pay, we're going to throw you in a cage and we're going to hold you hostage until you pay the ransom money called tax.
Yeah, and also, when you look at the tax code in the US or tax legislation in the UK, it's extremely complex. It's thousands and thousands of pages, multiple volumes. And the reason it is so that the royal families and the rich and the super elite, they're not paying taxes. You're paying taxes. They are tax free. Their income doesn't get taxed. And anytime somebody comes and says, no, they do pay, it's like, no, it's tokenistic and it's there to make people like you believe that it's a fair system. It's not a fair system. So what we've got is a plutocracy. Well, a plutocracy where the super elite
Yeah,
can inherit their wealth, pass it on tax free,
yeah,
can get through all the loopholes, and you can. So you get stuck at a strata and they get embedded as the top society.
yeah,
Now, where does that lead over time? Well, you couldn't have, without a fiat monetary system and taxation, these big agendas in play and all these wars. That's
yeah,
where it comes from.
yeah. Of
Go
course,
back to real money and it's impossible.
agreed 100%. What the average kind of normie thinks is that inequality is down to something that we don't have, which is free market capitalism. And what the government does is it reduces inequality. The truth is the exact opposite. The root cause of inequality in countries like Britain is the government. It's the government that passes regulations that give big corporations, I don't know, like British Gas or Virgin Trains, as it was, monopolies, state-sanctioned monopolies. Banks, I guess, is another one. How difficult it is for new entrants to come into the banking market and offer competition. And then my other one is like my other favorite example is housing benefit, because you get a lot of normies and they'll go, oh, well, what would we do if we didn't have a welfare state? And my answer to that is inequality would actually fall if we got rid of the welfare state. So if you take something like housing benefit, all you have to do is just follow the money. So a normie will go, well, what would poor people do? Well, if you actually follow the money, when somebody receives housing benefit, it doesn't stay in their pocket. It goes, first of all, into the buy-to-let landlord's pocket. And then if you follow the next step on, it goes into, most buy-to-let landlords will have a mortgage. So most of the housing benefit will flow into the big banks in the form of mortgage interest payments. So if you actually cut to the chase, plebs are paying tax and the money ends up with big banks. And that's done through the government. The vehicle, the conduit is the state. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, well, I think, a lot of people don't realize it's not the government paying for stuff. I'm paying for it and you're
Yeah,
paying for it. We're paying
yeah,
for stuff. All it is
yeah,
wealth redistribution. And
yeah,
yet, the problem with the wealth redistribution is you've got people skimming off 60-70% of that wealth, maybe
yeah,
even more. I mean, God knows how much of it is taken and robbed from us. So it's not like the government's paying for anything. We're paying for it. That's what people often miss.
yeah.
It's the inefficiency of that, because I know what I need more than what somebody in Whitehall knows what, or whichever country you're in that thinks that I need. We know what we need in our communities, and maybe you don't need the same stuff I need.
Yeah,
I've spent 20 years as an athlete. I train 6 times a week. I've never used a doctor in my life, so I'm paying for somebody else's high level of need who smokes, drinks, takes drugs, whatever. Like, is that fair? No, there's always an unfairness to this system, and we
but
all
but
should be able to take care of our own needs and not have to pay for everyone else's in a
but then
collectivism.
the thing is, Mike, is with that, there's another bigger issue, which is, can you actually trust the government to provide healthcare? And for what I would say is,
I call
you
it death
can't.
care.
You can't exactly, and it's the thing with the what I call the Britney Spears and the boosters. That's just the tip of the iceberg. You've got their so-called healthy eating advice, which is the exact opposite, and things like the stuff for all the cholesterol medication, and I can't go into that, but I don't. I've personally I've made a decision to stay well clear of any of that stuff. I don't trust them.
Well, that's the problem we're getting at. That's the core of it. Is the whole system is designed to take our wealth and to pass it off to that ruling plutocracy who have controlling interest shares in the many complexes, military, pharma, ag. They're consuming all of it. And ultimately, that is a slave system. It's a serfdom system.
Yeah.
It's just people don't know it. You have to study it to find out who actually owns these things and why do they get to keep their wealth and why do I lose mine? Why do they have property rights that I don't have?
Yeah.
Why are my property rights subordinate to theirs? Because we're meant to live in an equal system, and and I don't think everything should be equal, but I think when you've had families that have been able to get away with this scam for thousands of years, and me and you get reset every time. I mean, you pay 40-50% tax your entire life. It takes you about 4 or 5 months a year just to pay your tax burden. And then you finally pay off your mortgage, you finally pay off your many loans, just as you're about to retire, you die, and they take another 40-50% from your capital gains or inheritance. What I mean? The system is really rigged against us. And I think just people understanding that. The biggest scam of them all, of course, is fiat money and currency debasement, because that's the hidden tax that you don't see.
So, Mike, what I want to hammer home to people watching this now is that the source of all of this misery and inequality is the government, is the politicians. Even if you go to fiat money, it's that centralization of power. No entity in the future should have the power to create money by lending it into existence. We need to go back to real money, commodity money, gold and silver.
Yeah, and the thing is,
human beings.
Outside of the governments, you've also got, the governments are essentially, what are they? They're just a puppet system for a banking oligarchy and banking cartels. And I would say a select group of people who have interest in all of the above. So again, like the governments, you can bring one in, you can bring another in, you can get rid of one. That's why I don't deal in politics. We could have hundreds of thousands of views, Nigel, on our channel if we just sat here debating which politician we prefer, and we can put ourselves in the right-wing box or the left-wing box or the centrist or libertarian. You know what I mean? None of that stuff actually matters. The system will reinvent itself all the time.
100%. I don't know if you know this Gary's economics, but he's just one of these. Gary Stevenson, I think he's called. He's got some book out. I reckon he's basically controlled opposition. You can tell from the setup of his studio, it's all very professional. And his narrative is he speaks like Brian Harvey out of E17, he's down with the kids and everything. And his solution is we need to do something about inequality, right? So he's trying to get the sheep to usher in some sort of police state where there's no property rights and the state can just dip into people's pockets and redistribute it to people that, Gary thinks are more deserving than the people that actually earned that money.
Well, Gary should move to I don't know, Venezuela, or he could maybe try Argentina. What's he doing in Britain?
But this is the thing, isn't it? Is that it goes back to that Divic 91 thing, in that people are immoral, and they like the big government model because they hope that people with big sticks will be employed to go and steal money from one group of people, in the hope that this entity called government will redistribute the loot, what was looted, and give it to them. So they love this. This Gary, he's very, very popular. He gets millions of YouTube views precisely because he's promoting theft and immorality under the guise of.
There's a lot of people like that, and that's the way to get big on YouTube, is just to reaffirm the system. And they don't care if, there's a lot of channels out there who are talking about the stuff we're talking about critically. So people think, oh, they're on our side. And it's like, that's not how it works. What solutions are you talking about? And how are you diagnosing the problem is what counts. Because if you point to the man behind the curtain, you're going to get shadow banned. And, I've got an interview on Palisades Gold Radio with 73,000 views. But I put a video on my channel with 8,500 subscribers, and it might get 500 views these days. I was getting more views when I had 1,000 subscribers. And I can see in the analytics how it's been done. Once you have a channel and you have it long enough, you see how the cake is baked. And I know other big channels like Matt Smith and Doug Casey's channel. Matt said to me, he literally has seen people just when he's been watching his analytics, just 5,000 views just gone, just like that. And it happens to me with every video. So, they don't want people talking about these ideas. They want you to have conversations that actually work to reinvent the system for them. Because if we're sat here talking about, well, what about if we put this politician in? What about Donald
Yeah,
Trump? What about this guy? That's what they want, because really it's just more of the same, two wings of the same bird, as they say.
exactly.
So we have to be careful about the solutions, but ultimately, like I said, if you start simple, I'm not claiming to have all the solutions, but I know if you start simple, you go back to small scale living with communities, you find the answers naturally start to come to you,
Well,
because
I think
you'll
I'm
naturally
agree.
order yourself.
I'm with you, Mike. What you're suggesting is also what I'm suggesting, is that we need to end compelled transactions. The big government model is fundamentally, well, it's inefficient as well, but it's immoral. That's the biggest problem with it. And what your system is, localized, decentralized, based on voluntary exchange, people getting together and exchanging for a mutually beneficial outcome. Like, when you trade with somebody, no one forces you to do it. So presumably you do it because what you're giving up is less valuable to you than what you're getting in return. And the opposite is the case with the person that's trading with you. They're valuing what you have more than what they have. So when you exchange, both of you become better off. So I think that's the solution. The solution's there. It's just trying to convince these people, these immoral people, that the solution is not big government, because big government is immoral. We've got about 2.5 minutes, Mike. We've got, so go on. You have the last two
we're
and a
in the
half.
countdown.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, a lot of people might say, well, I've had it said to me before, well, what you're doing is primitive. It can't work on a big scale. And it's like, well, good luck with the system you've got, because when that comes down, it's going to be those primitive systems that work. And of course, you expand out from there. It's about protecting yourselves going into what are undoubtedly going to be extremely difficult times ahead. Everything that is centralized can be usurped and broken like that.
Yeah.
One supply chain breaks down and you're starving because the supermarkets don't have any food. If you want to trust that system to provide for you, then that's the way. That's where you put yourself. But if you don't, then you've got no choice now. That's the point. We've got no choice but to start taking care of our own health, food, water. And listen, I hope it never happens that I actually have to be fully dependent on those systems. But if I do, then I'll be happy that I did it.
But you're already benefiting now, because you're no longer taking part in something that's deeply immoral.
Exactly,
You're taking part in voluntary exchange with people for a mutually beneficial gain.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we have people go by our house. Somebody came and bought 100 eggs yesterday, 50 eggs the other day. We buy milk of our neighbors. Life's better when you've got those kind of local connections. You produce
Yeah.
something, they produce something.
Yeah.
Our neighbors, grow as well. So simple, listen, there's plenty of ways to live, and I would never tell anyone else how to live. What actually prompted me to do this was a distrust of the old system.
Yeah.
But once I did come back to living like this and like learning that these ways, these old ways, it's so much more rewarding. It's so much more
Yeah.
fulfilling to have a genuine community around you.
And more moral as well, Mike. Again, it's that morality. You're not paying into a system that's funding wars, for example.
no, and there's no, we deal in cash over
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Mike, that's been absolutely brilliant. It's going to cut off in a second, so thanks so much for coming on. I don't know if you ever want to have a chat again. We could talk, I don't know, a bit more detail about econ and money, because I know that's an area for you, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can check me out on Parallel Systems Broadcast on YouTube or parallelmike.com. I've got a podcast and a YouTube show, slightly separate. And yeah, I'd love to come back on and talk again, Nigel. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for the invite. It was an honor.
Brilliant. I'll put all the details in the description as well for your sites and that. So
Cheers,
thanks a
Nigel.
lot. Thanks again, Mike.
Have
Cheers,
a great
mate.
day. Thank
Thanks.
you.
God bless.